Thank you, Sean. It's a great pleasure to be invited to speak to this conference. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you personally today, but obviously distance makes it quite impractical. I suppose I really ought to start off by saying that I don't have any commercial or political agenda in anything that I'm likely to say. I'm just speaking entirely as an independent, with a view really just to sharing some ideas and knowledge with you, and hopefully helping you on this very interesting and important journey. I'm talking to you from just outside London in the UK, so there are nearly 4,000 miles between us at the moment. But let's not let distance get in the way of this conversation. We are, after all, a country which shares a common language. Well, more or less. I say tomato, you say tomato. But let's not call the whole thing off. What we also share is a common interest in how AI will develop and how it will affect the workforce. If you feel that there are worries and concerns in North America, I'd suggest to you that those same concerns and worries also exist in the UK and Europe. So we have a common language, common interests, and common concerns. During the lockdown, particularly in the UK, many of us found little things to do to while away the time during the pandemic. And for me, my pandemic project was this little gem, AI and the future of the public sector. Because I was seeing how hard the public sector were working, but also recognising that perhaps there would be consequences after the pandemic in terms of maybe finance, but also the impact of the pressures on the public purse. And I think we're seeing them already in terms of manpower and recruiting and price pressures. But what the book actually did was it gave me a very good insight into the breadth and depth and complexity of the public sector, and really reminded me just how important you are to civilization as we know it. It's kind of you're kind of a group that many people just take for granted in many ways, but without you, the world would be very, very different. So it would be remiss of me, not to take this opportunity to say thank you, because you make a very, very big difference, and that difference will continue to happen as we go forward, even in the era of AI. So let's talk a little about the world of work and how it affects you as workers and the people that you represent. Well, I guess really AI, from a work point of view, means different things to different people in terms of its impact. For many workers, particularly people who are following the press, what they see on the news or in the newspapers, they might view the world of AI, the future world of AI, as being a bit of a threat. There are, of course, others, perhaps the employers of this world, who are viewing the world of AI as being an opportunity to provide service, but at reduced cost, to help make the books balance. And the third group are those who are the providers of AI, the technology companies, many of the consultants. Many of these are seeing the world of AI as being an opportunity for them. It's a bit of a gold rush, really. So AI is meaning different things to different people, and you are one particular group of stakeholders in that equation. But I think I want to stop just for a moment and provide you with a level check, because if we're talking about AI, what do we really mean by AI? How do we define it, especially if it means different things to different people? So I like to think of AI as being a little bit like the top of the mountain. I think in your part of the world, where's my note, you have Sugarloaf Mountain, which is a place to get to. But of course, at the bottom of Sugarloaf Mountain are the foothills. And the foothills of the AI world is what we might call the data foundation. Everything starts with data, and data is a critical part of the journey. But as we continue our journey up the mountain, we start seeing data being used to provide descriptions and reports, and we move into a world of descriptive analytics. And many of us will see descriptive analytics being represented by perhaps pie charts or spreadsheets or tables. And these are the reports which people use really to measure performance. As we carry on up the mountain, we move to predictive analytics. So we've moved from descriptive to predictive, using the same data, but using it to anticipate what will happen next. As we carry on further upwards towards the peak, we then enter a world of prescriptive analytics, where data is being used to be embedded into workflow and for automated decisions to be made. Remember, all of this is stemming from the data foundation. And then when we get to the top of the mountain, this is where we find the world of artificial intelligence, or AI. And of course, AI is such a topical thing at the moment that it feels a little like an umbrella expression for so many different capabilities which are being used. Facial recognition, voice recognition, the use of chatbots, all wrapped in this AI banner. So therefore, the expression AI is being thrown around, it's being used pretty well in so many different areas. But it is not what experts might call pure AI, where we can't actually distinguish decisions made by the computer than those which might be made by a human. So, what does all this mean in terms of the world of work? Coming back to our worker bee again. Well, certainly it would appear to be having some sort of effect. The financial services company Goldman Sachs suggest that maybe 300 million jobs in the US and Europe will be affected. That's 25% of all work tasks. Consultants McKinsey suggest that maybe 12 million jobs will be affected by 2030. That only feels just around the corner. But where will these job changes happen? Where will the impact be felt? In my second book, I think it was, talking about AI and the future of work, I considered that almost all industries would be affected. But I actually grouped them into Tier 1 industries, effectively the early movers, and Tier 2 industries, who were effectively the followers. And there are pros and cons to being an early mover or being a follower. The early movers, for example, you might find in banking or wealth management or in retail. The Tier 2 industries, the followers, you might see traditionally in maybe education, the care services perhaps, or in agriculture. But what I'm beginning to see is an increasing convergence between Tier 1 and Tier 2, particularly as there is more knowledge being shared between industries, and people are moving from Tier 1 into Tier 2 and vice versa. But there is a challenge, of course, that the companies who are most likely to benefit are the ones who will be able to pay experts to implement their AI systems. So therefore, the Tier 2 companies, Tier 2 industries, may find a struggle in finding the right people to implement. So in other words, they could have a vision, but a challenge in actually doing what they want to do. Of course, then we might look at professions, and almost all professions will be affected in one shape or another. Perhaps those who won't be affected might be the professions which are hugely creative, or perhaps those where the work is just so manual as to prevent computer systems ever being used. So the creative end could well be the ballet dancer, and the manual work could well be the lumberjack. But maybe everybody in the middle will be affected to one degree or another. But what does that actually mean practically? What does it mean for you and for me? So, I thought a little when I was preparing this presentation of what I should be considering, what I should be including. And you know, I cheated a little bit. I actually looked at my computer system, my chat GPT, and asked the system what I should be presenting to you today. And it came up with a really good answer, a really good set of comments, a really good set of solutions. And in fact, maybe I could have even used that entire presentation which had been created for me by a computer. Maybe the world of work could be more directed by automated systems rather than free choice. We simply just don't know. So, back to the world of work, the world of AI and how it affects your particular job. You have to ask yourself a question. What part of your job, what part of my job, cannot be done by a computer or a system, or perhaps ultimately a robot? And if you cannot answer that question clearly and positively, then your job potentially is at risk at some time in the future. For example, those who are working in care homes may be aware that in certain parts of the world, robotic care home assistants are being used. And of course, education is also being transformed, partly because of remote teaching. But it is moving away from teaching into learning, which lends itself very strongly to automated systems. What will the teacher of tomorrow look like, and what job will he really have? So these are all important questions for us. And of course, the data is coming from multiple sources, both structured and unstructured. Unstructured data typically being video or voice. So there are real challenges then as to how that data is actually taken, how it is safeguarded, and what privacy rights exist around the data. The challenge also is that if we are relying on automated systems to help with decision making, then those systems need to be balanced and fair, and that relies on the data being representative of the population as a whole. If it is not representative, then bias and discrimination can occur. That bias and discrimination can be accidental, or it can even be deliberate. But data and data security and cybersecurity sits at the very heart of everything we will be thinking about in the world of AI. Of course, we think about bias within data as being potentially affecting employees in terms of our workloads fair and reasonable? Is the management of performance fair and reasonable? Or are different parts of the workforce being discriminated against? But it's not just about the workforce. Remember that the public sector cares for some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And if those vulnerable people are having decisions made by a system automatically, and if that system is not fair and has perhaps a bias in some way, then those poorest people in our society could well be disadvantaged. So therefore, bias and data is a really, really critical issue in terms of the world of AI. What next? Well, we need to think about how data is actually being used. Will the way that data is used be transparent, or will it be done in some sort of a black box? The challenge really is that if we don't understand how the data is being used, then we may distrust it. It could have more important ramifications. We spoke a little about descriptive analytics, the use of data and analytics to measure progress and performance. But imagine a world where disciplinary measures were triggered automatically due to a failure of an individual or a group to meet performance targets. So therefore, we need to understand really how the data is being used And if we don't really understand that, then it feels to me that there is a potential loss of trust between employees and employers. What else? Well, what about the impact of AI and automatic systems on the contracts and the terms and conditions of our worker bees? Might it make a difference in terms of the nature of contracts which are being offered? Maybe the contracts will become more short-term in nature, maybe even zero-hour contracts. And how will it impact on hourly rates, for example? What are the consequences of these changes on the terms and conditions of the workforce? We think, of course, about the workforce, but the workforce is a rather broad church, and I want to spend a moment or two thinking about management. And management, of course, really is a function which carries out a number of key activities. But many, if not all of those activities, can be replaced in full or in part by a system. What then is the future of managers going forward? How will they need to change their skills and competences to live and operate effectively in a world of AI? So the challenge isn't just for our bee here, but the challenge is also for the management layer. But it goes above that. Think about the leaders of industries. Think about those who we might describe as being the captains of industry, the ones that we look to for guidance and direction. What does all this mean for them? Well, if we think of them as the captain of industries, then they are captains really who have no experience of sailing in what could well turn out to be stormy waters. Even worse, they could be sailing in stormy waters without a chart and even without a compass. They have no experience of what is likely to hit them in the years to come. So perhaps the nature of leadership might even change as we go forward. It's just one of many changes. So I guess the challenge is that we know we live in a world of change, but sometimes we don't see it happening all the time. What has really changed from yesterday to today to tomorrow? The change may be really difficult to see on a day-by-day basis, but maybe a little bit like your cell phone or your laptop. If you look back at what you were using maybe 5 or 10 years ago, or even a shorter period than that, it becomes easier to see the very substantial change which has occurred. Your device might have greater memory, might have more apps, might be lighter, might have better battery power. So over the passage of time, it becomes easier to see the step changes which has happened. But the reality is AI and the world of data being infused into industry and the public sector is happening all the time. It is creeping around us. We have to be vigilant. So what are the challenges? Well, the first challenge really for the union movement and for many, many organisations is to recognise that change is happening. So we cannot be like an ostrich putting our head into the sand and hoping this won't happen. It will happen. There's no avoiding it. But it must happen in a controlled sort of way. So in recognising that change will happen, and recognising that workers almost at all levels will be affected in almost every industry and every profession, then we need to think about how the impact and the changes will be communicated to all those stakeholders. Communication could well be a critical competence going forward. Now, communication, of course, it's so easy to drop into a world of jargon and technical expressions, which, frankly, not too many people actually really understand. So as you communicate, You have to be able to do that in layman's terms, in a way which is digestible and relatively simple. You also have to do it with sensitivity. When I was preparing my AI public sector book, as I spoke to the unions, they said that their members are concerned, as your members are concerned, and therefore it was important that communication was managed sensitively and without emotion. So, think a little about your communication strategy. And as people understand what is happening, then they will be able to play a more active part in the outcome. Active engagement is really critical. You are all stakeholders in the future. Your profession, your career, your livelihood may depend on it. You cannot afford to be a bystander and watch things happen to you. But the truth of the matter is that the AI genie, is now out of the bottle. And there is no way that that AI genie is going to be put back in the bottle. It is something we're going to have to live with. Change will occur. Challenge really is we don't know exactly how it will occur, where it will occur, and how quickly it will occur. The reality is it may occur in pockets rather than in one amazing overnight change. If I have a single message for you, it is one of preparing for the future. Because if you prepare for the future, you as an organisation and all your members can move forward with confidence. We should not be afraid of the future, provided that we prepare adequately for it. And the time to start preparing is now.